Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, on this smashing Saturday for another jam-packed daily market update. My apologies for being absent tomorrow. However, hopefully we are back with a bang, and we've got quite a lot to cover over the past 48 hours. And of course, if you're new here, we drop one of these updates on the cryptocurrency markets and the broader markets every single day around 1 p.m. UK time. So make sure you check out that subscribe button. We're going to be starting things off with some irony. We're going to be looking at who really was the star of the show, according to CNBC, at the Bitcoin 2025 conference. And apparently it wasn't Bitcoin, but in fact stablecoins that stole the show, which is rather ironic given what this industry initially spawned out of. And we've actually said that. There's an irony in the cryptocurrency space that the initial movement that it came from, it's actually in many ways doing the opposite. You know, it's not toppling over the financial system, but actually enhancing it and evolving it. So we're going to start the video off there, and then we're going to look at some really interesting stats in regards to US stocks. In fact, the Mag 7 stocks had their best calendar month ever. And that's interesting. And I think to put that into context, of course, you had one of the worst following on the back end of everything that's going on the macro stage with tariffs, so on and so forth. And we've put our opinion out in regards to what way we think that goes. Our bias is that actually tariffs don't get literally implemented, and they're really just a bargaining tool for Trump to get what he wants. We'll look at the stock market in relation to that, of course. And actually, interestingly also, IBIT has hit a new monthly record of inflows. And this has happened at the same time that the stock market has. And I think this is preparing us for what's to come. Then we're going to look at the Bank of England potentially buying Bitcoin. This, of course, is according to Nigel Farage, who is the leader of the Reform Party here in the UK. We'll look at some Bitcoin price action. Then we've got news on staking ETFs, and Rex have filed for a Ethereum and Solana ETF. Then I want to talk to you guys about XRP, because there was some news in regards to White Rock oil tokenization, and this is taking place in conjunction with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for oil to be tokenized on the XRP ledger, but also Saudi Armco, which at one point was the largest company in the world. I can't believe this hasn't had... this should have had a lot more coverage, and we'll link this in with what's taking place with their real estate. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick the video off. Stablecoin stole the show at Bitcoin 2025. Here's what the major players said, and it talks about Vice President J.D. Vance called stablecoins a force multiplier for US economic power, and endorsed the Genius Act to regulate them. The SEC is retreating from aggressive enforcement, clearing the way for banks and brokers to enter the stablecoin market. The last update we did, we looked at the taking away of the limitations that had been put in place in regards to adding crypto to a 401k. Now, this stuff likely has to come to pass before they really open the floodgates with ETFs. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second in regards to a Solana staking ETF that's coming. Tether CEO says half of the world's population is underserved by banks, and stablecoins are how crypto will reach them. And I think this is rather ironic. I want to start on that because it's why we always clown the maxis, right? I, at one point, was massively a Bitcoin maxi as a libertarian. Mostly libertarian. I'm not quite convinced there is a perfect system. I don't think Nirvana's for this world. But I started off as a maxi, very much so, a believer in Bitcoin and the narrative. And then it became very apparent to me that that narrative had been hijacked, and that actually Bitcoin was no longer pursuing freedom via a alternative monetary system, but instead had been captured into becoming kind of a store of value, equivalent to gold, making it dormant in regards to the broader revolution and properties that it may have held. And actually, that's in line with anybody else who's ever tried to move away from the central banking debt-based system. You know, they've often fallen short of being able to do so. Sometimes it ends very horrifically. And I think Bitcoin didn't meet the horrific ending, but certainly was hijacked. And actually, this technology, DLT, is doing far more to enable the very thing that Bitcoin was essentially introduced to combat than to combat it. And I find this interesting. And for me, stablecoins are the big narrative when it comes to the cryptocurrency space. The US is going to adopt it. And I'm invested in plays that I believe are going to enable this US dollar expansion. They're going to use it to solve issues with the debt market, so on and so forth. I actually did a great interview with the CEO of Qantas, Arnoud. Great guy, super intelligent. We'll be releasing that at some point. He works with the Dutch Central Bank. And we really speak about the unlock that this technology doesn't just bring for the Forex market, but the world as a whole and the investment arena, because you free up a lot of liquidity when you essentially solve problems within the system. So very interesting. I want to start on that. It's always important for us to have context and bigger thoughts on the markets, and that is one, if nothing else. Let's talk about a tweet here from Eric Balanchunas. Mag7 ETF just had the best calendar month ever, and is up 26% since the 7th of the 4th, which of course is Cramer's Black Monday. And to put some context in this, you know, we did have a pretty horrific time on the back end of Trump's new presidency. It's very common when a new president takes a term, the market faces uncertainty to begin with. Trump is an over-exaggeration, I think, of uncertainty, or his, you know, he's essentially a beater on uncertainty. And of course, the markets did sell off. They've pulled back or recovered mostly. I think they're going to recover entirely, and we're going to embark on higher ground. And I think that has to come on an economic narrative. But I do think we are getting that, and we're continuously getting more confirmation towards it. Also, in line with this is from Nate Garcia. We had pretty bad outflows yesterday. I think it was one of the worst days in terms of outflows for IBIT. We're not just putting a bias here saying this is super bullish and it's all positive. There was massive outflows yesterday. You can go and check that out. But as a month as a whole, May has been a record month also. So we're seeing investors piling back in. And I think one thing that we covered, certainly in the doldrums of this pullback, was the fact that retail was wrong. The fact that sentiment was wrong. The sentiment was lower than the lockdowns, lower than 2008, lower than the 2000s. And we said that is not the reality, I believe, of the situation or the resolve of the situation. People were being too literal, I think, with tariffs and things like that. And then they had every reason to be quite honest. So we've got a record month for the Mag7 ETFs. We've got a record month for BlackRock's iShares. They continue to gobble up Bitcoin. And, you know, Nvidia got very close, or is certainly performing in regards to the falling wedge that we drew. And I think this entirely engulfs. You're going to have some pushback. The crypto market is still very much lost at sea when it comes to everything happening on the macro. But we still think there's a great time ahead for it. What I want to do now is dive into another clip that came out of Bitcoin 2025 of Nigel Farage talking about the prospect of the Bank of England essentially being on the brink of buying Bitcoin. However, you know, he's still got to win. And I'm sure, you know, very polarizing figure like Trump, Nigel Farage, I'm sure we'll see how all that goes. But I think reforms actually stand a good chance. I think people in the UK at this point want change. That's just my own personal opinion. Maybe I'm entirely wrong on that. And I think they kind of voted for Labour, really, in many ways, to spite the Conservatives to try and get that change. But perhaps hasn't been the change they want. And they're going to go for somebody, I think, like we're seeing a trend generally towards the right across certainly Europe and I think the world more broadly. Which we did prophesy a while ago. Let's dive into this clip of Nigel Farage, and then we'll proceed with the video.
Thrilled to be here today, but to announce that rather than just words, we have put together, and this is exclusive for today, the Crypto Assets and Digital Finance Bill.
Months of work, ladies and gentlemen.
We will campaign for this, and we'll put it in place when we win the next general election. And what we're saying is bring crypto and digital assets in from the cold. Have a capital gains rate of 10%. And that means, you know, if taxes are reasonable, people will pay them. We're going to have a Bitcoin digital reserve in the Bank of England. And we are going to pass legislation that says that no bank can close your account because you're trading in legal crypto or digital products.
No more debanking, ladies and gentlemen.
So yeah, we are taking it very, very seriously. And you know, it's really interesting. I mean, 7 million people in Britain have got crypto assets. 1 in 4 people under 30 have got crypto assets. And yet our outdated Labour and Conservative governments have done nothing in this space at all. And what I want to do when we win the next election is bring us into the 21st century. We are going to launch in Britain a crypto revolution. We're going to make London one of the major trading centres of the world. We're deadly serious, and here it is.
Even though many of the things that are being said there is music to my ears, you know, we're a while away from the next general election. By that time, most countries would be miles ahead. That's the truth. Certainly look at what's happening in the US and more broadly. It's interesting. We're actually getting a lot of stats. They raised capital gains and they raised a number of taxes here in the UK, expecting it to bring in a net positive, you know, more revenue, and it's done the opposite because people have just left. They don't pay it, and we kind of almost defended Liz Truss. I know, and what she was putting in place with the tax cuts, because I think actually if you tax people less, you'll end up generating more money because people won't go so far out of their way to avoid paying it. I could be wrong on that. You know, these are just my sort of thoughts, and we enjoy sharing them with you on a daily basis. But very interesting. Just a shame that we're that far away from the next general election, I think. You know, I personally want to see some change in the UK. I'm willing to give perhaps people a go with new policies, but, you know, I need to see a little bit more. Bitcoin, you all know the story. Nothing's changed for us. You know, technically, yeah, we're going to have ebb and flows day to day, but ignore those. Focus on the bigger picture and you'll do just fine. Your mental health will be far more intact. Also, that's what we try and do here on this channel every single day, is make sure your mental health is in chat. We care about you. And ultimately, that's why we always look at the bigger picture. Smaller time frames as it relates to Bitcoin, it's just following the plan. It's just been continuation pattern after continuation pattern in this uptrend. And we're essentially predominantly trend following investors. And obviously, we view the markets through phase analysis. If you want to become a Patreon, do check the link in the description. Well worth joining. But we did look at a kind of inverse head and shoulders. I wouldn't want to see the sort of 101,000 level ran. In fact, we're going to put that on because then you'd invalidate this pattern and you know, you'd have essentially done what we said it was going to do in regards to this falling wedge, engulf the entire pullback, which it's done. But, you know, then you're in a bit of danger. I don't like this marginally higher high. I want to see more progression. But this is the first higher high in what is a new trend for Bitcoin, or is already an uptrend for Bitcoin. Let's talk about what Eric Balanchunas is also tweeting about here. First ever staked Ethereum and Solana ETFs could be launching soon. Remember, you don't actually have a Solana ETF yet, a spot one. Rex filing went effective, meaning launch likely in the near term, would also be first ever spot Solana ETF 2. Only futures exist currently. This is the benefit of using 40 Act. It's fast track to market, but more work boxes to check versus 33 Act. Interesting. So very interesting. You are going to get ETFs. I think they were waiting to do things like, you know, get legislation in place and do things with a 401k before they enable all of this. Let's talk about XRP. XRP is very sort of polarizing, I think. It's like Marmite. I'm a big XRP holder. You know, we also hold its kind of competitor, which it's not really, which is XLM. We'll do a longer video on that and how they're both addressing the same market but different sectors within it. Because people get very tribal. That's by design, by the way. They're playing you to be that way because they don't want people to see the bigger. They want them to be in a box and to not get outside that box and to actually see that, you know, that there's bigger things going on. But this is from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, White Rock Oil Tokenization. Now, you are going to have oil tokenized by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with Saudi Aramco. Can you see that? Hopefully everyone can see that. Aramco, Saudi Arabian oil company, which was, at one point, the largest stock in the world. Today it sits at 7th position, and they're using the XRP ledger. Now, if that isn't huge and doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. Also, we know about what's taking place over there with their real estate. Interesting how all this is coming to fruition. I mean, these aren't things that have just happened overnight. These are things that have been worked on for years, and now we're starting to see it bear fruit. XRP's been coiling up for years. So is XLM. You've got major moves coming for both of these, and they're going to play a fundamental role in the internet value that we're moving towards. That's just my take. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to love and leave you. It's always a pleasure. Enjoy your Saturdays, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.